Welcome to one of us. Action. Oh, I hurt my thumb. But then oh no! Wait, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Hey everybody, welcome to a brand new episode of the Internet show, and it's episode 5 and it's my favourite time of the year, Halloween. So sit back, relax and enjoy the show. But before we get started, if you saw last week's episode, you'll know that I have some cats and I like cats. Well, I was setting up to record this week's show and I came through into the room and this is what I saw. So yes, apparently the cats like to record as well. So this week we're going to take a look a little bit at the news and then we're going to go straight into discussing Halloween. I've got a lot of viewer interaction. I asked you guys a bunch of questions and a lot of you responded. So we're going to go through those and we're just going to generally chat about Halloween. So let's go. So the first piece of news that actually just broke sort of moments ago in terms of when I'm filming is the news that Meryl Streep, Cameron Diaz and Mila Jovovich have all been tapped to appear in the Expendables, which is a female version of the Expendables. Now, to be honest, this sounds like a massive joke that someone who was about 12 came up with. Now, I get bringing in females and having strong feminine characters, but I don't see why they can't do that in the Expendables films. And I can almost get them doing a spin-off with females, but I just can't get behind this title of Expendables. To me, it's just dumb. Also this week, CBS have announced that they are looking at rebooting Charmed, which was a TV show that ran from 1998 to 2006, which featured 3 witches and was all about fighting demons, sort of in the style of Buffy, Angel, that kind of show, that kind of fantasy show. This isn't surprising to me, given the fact that, if you look at the schedule, like I said in the article, a lot of shows are fantasy-based, horror-based, so this isn't really surprising. But the fact that this is such a sort of recent show that they're looking at rebooting is kind of shocking to me, and I fear that they're going to go for the sort of True Blood style, that kind of audience, Twilight, that kind of thing. Whereas I think the show would probably better be served going darker, getting rid of the sillier elements that featured, especially in those earlier episodes. And yeah, it's very strange. Charmed's one of those things that was something very close to my childhood and when I was growing up, so it's a show I really liked. So the fact that they're rebooting it kind of makes me worried a little bit that they're going to make something that doesn't have that charm. You aren't able to love it as much. The characters don't have that dynamic that they had. The same as way that Joss Whedon has that dynamic between characters. They very much got that with Charmed, and it kind of makes me a little bit worried. The trailer for Captain America 2 also hit this week, and I've got to say I was quite impressed with it. Action-packed, a lot of great character. This is the third film now in the Phase 3. We've had Thor 2 that was just released, and then we had Iron Man 3, which came out earlier in the year, I think. And this one to me felt much more like a sequel to Avengers. You've got Scarlett Johansson in there, you've got Samuel L. Jackson in there, and it felt very much like a continuation of the Avengers instead of a standalone film, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It was really nice to see those characters inhabit a film in more than a cameo sort of capacity. So I was quite impressed with this, and I'm looking forward to seeing the film. I'm interested because the reviews for Thor 2 haven't been so hot, given the hype around that film was quite big and the anticipation for it was very high, and a lot of the previews said that it was it was looking really good and really interesting. And upon its release, the reviews were, really mild. You're looking at sort of 6.5s out of 10. So maybe this can continue to keep the quality up and maybe keep it going.
It's Halloween. I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare.
I've had my share.
So earlier in the week I asked you guys a bunch of questions. My first question was, so we've had plenty of horror icons come to blow throughout history, but which iconic character comes out on top in the ultimate battle for you, and why? So Greg Scott was someone who answered, and he said for him it was Freddy Krueger. He said he knows some of the sequels for many people got a bit over the top, and they perhaps came more funny than scary in many ways, and became commercial, but when he first saw the original film, he thought the idea was very clever and thought that it was genuinely scary, evil, and Freddy was a very witty character. Quite terrifying, the thought of someone stalking you in your dreams, potentially every time you shut your eyes. And yes, Greg, I agree with you 100% on that. That's probably be my choice. Just the idea that someone can haunt you in your dreams and, you know, turn your worst nightmare into a reality in a sense is a very, very terrifying concept. And you know, I think A Nightmare on Elm Street hasn't dated very well. It's one of the franchise films that I feel is quite aged now. But the concept of it is so terrifying, and honestly I think there's so much potential for it, and we'll get to question 2 on the potential of that. And yeah, I think I absolutely agree, yeah. So Ross M. Thompson says for him it's Ash Williams.
Who's laughing now?
Because he's fought most of the legendary horror flick bad guys, in the comics at least, and won. So yeah, Ash is an interesting one that I hadn't even thought of. He has become so iconic and so lovable that yeah, I guess he does stand a fighting chance against all these other creatures. And we've seen him battle Freddy, we've seen him battle Jason in the comic book, which continued the Freddy vs. Jason franchise. And he's just, you know, he's one of those characters that no one seems to be able to kill. He's almost like the reverse of a horror movie bad guy. He's the good guy, but he always keeps coming back. And yeah, that's a good one. So for Trevor Farley over at Mass Movie Side UK podcast, he says for him it's Jason Voorhees. He's the undead bulldozer. He's got 13 films, which say it all. Jason for me was always kind of the least popular one in terms of what I liked. He was entirely iconic, but he just didn't really grasp it. I didn't do it for me at all. I always looked at sort of Jason and Michael as being two very similar movie monsters. The fact they didn't talk, they kind of bulldozed their way through the scenes. You know, Michael's not as big, but they're both silent, and they essentially walk and nothing seems to penetrate them. They always get their kills, and I always favoured Michael over that. I thought he was just he had that little bit extra creep factor. One thing I found interesting about Jason is, you know, he always wondered what was under the mask, especially as the films went on and he started to get more decomposed. So those moments where you got to see under the mask were very, very terrifying, and it just showed you what kind of monster that person had become. And I guess he's one of the more tragic figures because, you know, he was a kid who wasn't quite, he was deformed, and you know, it's a sympathetic kind of thing what happened to him. But ultimately, yeah. Darkman220 also agrees that for him it's Freddy Krueger. For him, because he lives in the dream world and no matter what, he'll always find a way to kill you. And again, yeah, I absolutely agree. It doesn't. Michael, you know, kills with knives, whatever's available. Jason bulldozes his way through, but he'll kill with something sharp, usually, or blunt. Freddy has that capability of killing you with your own fear. And you know that because it's a nightmare, it can be anything, and just that fear of the unknown of what it's actually going to be is something that is very, very scary. And yeah, again, Freddy Krueger trumps it. So the second question that I posed to you guys was, many franchises have peaked, many are considered dead, Halloween for example. So looking at potentially rebooting those franchises or creating another sequel, how would you bring these films back for a modern audience? Pick your franchise and pick how you'd bring it back. So Greg again, he's looking at Nightmare on Elm Street, and he says he knows it was remade a couple years ago and many people hated it. A lot of the acting and characters were very bland. He really enjoyed Jackie Earle Haley and thought he did a good job. And he would really like to see a suspense horror thriller telling the story in a full feature of Freddy Krueger and how he became Freddy Krueger. So the kidnapping of the children, the court case that preceded that. And for him, that idea is very intense and it could be very scary. And he knows it's been told a few times, as I said to him. If you look at the Freddy Nightmares TV show, that had the very first episode of that was a sort of retelling of that with Robert Englund, which is the only reason to watch Freddy's Nightmares. It kind of gets worse and worse after that. But he would like to see it done again, done properly, and again, I'm kind of with him on that. I was very, very excited for the remake, and the first 2 minutes of it, I was really excited. That opening intro that they had with the chalk and the street sign and stuff. I was like, wow, great, we're going to get a really scary film here. And then it went downhill from there. Now, Jackie Earle Haley did do a great job, and I thought he was a really good Freddy Krueger. He held the film together, which ultimately, doesn't say much for the film. I didn't like how they made Freddy his makeup was half digital. I didn't like that. And I didn't think that Freddy fit into the world that they created, and it was all kind of a mishmash. None of the characters were interesting, Nancy wasn't interesting at all, and it was all just a bit bland. So I would definitely go for that for one of the things that should definitely be remade. So Ross would be interested in bringing back Hellraiser, which is interesting because we recently discovered that Clive Barker would be penning the remake for Hellraiser, so good news for you there, Ross. He would like to tell the story of Pinhead and how he was took to hell, how he escaped, and how he became the Cenobite Pinhead. And tell that story, make it very dark, make it very sexual, really keep those elements that the first sort of 2 films had. And he'd be very excited to see that. So essentially, he's looking at not necessarily rebooting the franchise, but doing a prequel. And so I'm sure it'll be interesting for him where they go with this, reboot. So Trevor is really interested in the found footage idea, and he would like to see them hire normal looking kids, tone down the sex a little bit, and he thinks that they could be onto a winner. So you know what, I kind of agree with you on that. Found footage, whilst it is something that's been done quite a lot these days, it's a very interesting concept. And the problem with it is, they always take the same approach. And I think, if you look at things like Cloverfield and things like that, things that try to do something a little different with it, The Bay, I think it shows that it can still be interesting. And it's just what you do with it. I remember hearing that Friday the 13th was originally going to have a sequel that would have been found footage. And a lot of people were like, whoa, no, we can't do that. What kind of director would ever do that? And honestly, I would have been quite interested to see the Friday the 13th kind of film, but done found footage. I thought maybe that could have been quite interesting. Of course, nothing I can think of tops Wreck, which is a really, really great found footage film. Really, really atmospheric, really scary. You really feel like you're with those characters. And I recommend you definitely watching that. Darkman says, Sleepaway Camp. You do it like the original, except change the names, keep the twist, and the deaths are original except for what happens to the chief. Now, I haven't seen Sleepaway Camp, but I am aware of the twist, and I'm not going to spoil it for anyone. But if you have seen it, it's a pretty radical twist, and it's very kind of fucked up. But yeah, Sleepaway Camp was one of these films that kind of came at the end of the slasher kind of craze in the 80s, and I think the market was so oversaturated by that point that a lot of people kind of just pushed it aside and didn't watch it. And it does kind of stand up as a decent slasher film. So I think it could be an interesting one to remake, especially with that undercurrent of what the twist is. Now, if you're keeping the twist the same, you run into that risk of, well, people know what the twist's going to be, or that's what they expect. But you can play on that fact, and play on the fact that they possibly might know what that twist is, or totally circumvent their expectations and do something entirely different. You take away the twist, it could be accused of being kind of any kind of generic slasher film without that kind of big twist. But yeah, good choice. So the last question that I posed to you guys was the top 10 horror films that you love, you enjoy, you love to watch at Halloween. So let's just get right in there and see what you guys have said. So for Greg, in no particular order, we've got Death Warmed Up, which actually haven't heard of, but it's a New Zealand film. Psycho, The Shining, Nightmare on Elm Street, An American Werewolf in London, The Exorcist, Hellraiser, Prom Night 2, Trick or Treat, and Bad Taste. Now the interesting thing is, Greg, I think you'll probably start to see a lot of the same films crop up in these next few lists. And you know, that kind of just shows how much staying power a lot of these films have actually got. So Ross Thompson says A Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th Part 2, Evil Dead, Exorcist, Alien, Halloween, The Shining, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Texas Chainsaw, and Night of the Living Dead. So again, a lot of the same kind of films. Trevor's response to this was that he was just finished pooping, but he was going to come back and answer the questions. Now, he didn't come back and answer the questions, so I hope he has finished pooping, because this was a couple of days ago, and I hope he's not lying dead in the toilet. It wasn't good for Elvis, and it's not good for you, Trevor. So I hope you're alright. If you are alright, come back and tell me your top 10 favourite horror films. And Darkman's favourite horror films are Halloween, Shaun of the Dead, interesting, Psycho, The Evil Dead, The Thing, Alien, Trick or Treat, Dawn of the Dead, the remake, which is interesting, Nightmare on Elm Street, and Friday the 13th, the original. Again, many of the same films coming up, and most of them I would actually agree with. I'd throw Wreck in there, definitely. Great film. But is there anything there that we've missed? Perhaps there's a film that you're like, oh, I know a great film that these guys should watch. Well, do write down in the comments, what films do you think we should watch at Halloween? So give me your top films. Doesn't have to be top 10, it can be top 5, top 1. Just give me some films to watch at Halloween. Gambling Man sent a request. He suggested that we do some live streams of the show, and yeah, it's certainly a suggestion that we could look at. If we build up enough audience and we have enough that we can actually talk about, then I'd be very happy to do some live streams. So if you'd be interested in participating in some live streams, do comment again below. And if you enjoy talking about horror, why not come and write a horror movie with us? Starting this Halloween, next Thursday, we will be launching a brand new feature where you, yes you, can write a fully fledged horror script. Now how that'll work is each week I'll present questions to you. The first week it's going to be, what is your favourite horror film? So just like what we've talked about today. And I want you to discuss why it works, why it doesn't work. I want you to question other people. I want you to engage with all the other writers on the project. And as we go week by week, I'll offer different discussion points, so plot points, characters, and we'll learn about script writing. And after 7 weeks, we'll have our own script. If you want more details on this project, go to One of Us. I will post a link below. There's an article, and there's also an introduction video from me. And I'm really looking forward to this project, and I think it's going to be really cool. I'm really happy that we're going ahead with it. And if you've got any suggestions for the show, anything like that, do post it below, because I want to make it as good as possible, and I want you guys to enjoy. And do follow us on Twitter. You can add me on Facebook. I'm Chris Harrison. Do feel free to hit me up there. Come over to the site, Oneofus.net. You can watch some great films with great commentaries. A lot of the films that were mentioned there, you can buy some commentaries and listen to certain people like Brian Salisbury, Chris Cox, and even Rage Selects Jason Murphy, who makes an appearance or two. So you should definitely check those out. Next week we'll probably continue the Halloween theme a little bit, so if there's anything Halloween related that you want to talk about, then do comment below. Do follow me on Twitter at Chris Harrison. Do follow One of Us on Twitter at Oneofus.net. Do enjoy my rambling bamblings, and until next week, stay alive, and I'll see you next week.